More people watched the NCAA Women's Basketball National Championship game than the Men's National Championship game for the first time in history, per data from Sports Media Watch. The Men's National Championship game on April 8, which saw the University of Connecticut Huskies prevail, 75-60, over the Purdue Boilermakers, was seen by an average of 14.823 million viewers across TBS, TNT and True TV, according to Sports TV ratings. That's the second lowest rated men's championship of all time, and over 4 million viewers less than the 18.89 million for the women's championship game that had the University of South Carolina Gamecocks defeat the Iowa Hawkeyes, 87-75, on Sunday, April 8. There was actually some precedent for this, as the women's Final Four game that had Caitlin Clark's Hawkeyes defeat Paige Booker's and the Huskies had 14.42 million viewers across ESPN channels, more than either of the men's Final Four games. Clark's gargantuan rise clearly helped steer the rise on the women's side, but there were also some drivers for the low number on the men's side. Related, women's basketball is gaining ground, but is March Madness ready to rival the men's game? The game aired on Turner cable channels, which generally don't have as big of a reach as broadcast channels like ABC, where the women's final aired. The 2024 women's final actually had more viewers than any of the men's championship games broadcasted on Warner Bros. Discovery's, WBD, Turner channels over the last decade. Here's how the 18.7 million average viewers for the 2024 Women's National Championship game compares to the last decade of men's games. #Ncaa March Madness pic.twitter.com/fkanksnu2h, Colin Solau, at Colin Solau. April 8, 2024. However, the women's Final Four game of Iowa and UConn was aired on Disney-owned, DIS, ESPN's cable channels and still outpaced any of the two men's Final Four games. On the men's championship side, there were also complaints about the late start time. The game tipped off at 9:20 p.m. Eastern Time on a Monday. The women's game did air on the favorable day of Sunday, though it tipped at 3 p.m. Eastern Time instead of a primetime slot. But perhaps that biggest drawback for the men's side could still go back to what many pundits have been pointing at all season, the lack of star power. Men's athletes are able to go to the NBA after just 1 year, making it harder for players to gain a following or emotional investment from the fans. Related, WNBA Commissioner has big plans for the league's next media rights deal. LeBron James made this exact point during the episode of his podcast Mind the Game that released on April 9. The men have the ability to go to the NBA right after our freshman year, James said. In the women's game, you have the ability to build your legacy and build your rapport and brand with that fan base, with that community.